I solemnly pledge myself in the presence of God and in this assembly to faithfully practice my profession of nursing. I will abstain from whatever is deleterious and mischievous, and will not take or knowingly administer any harmful drug. I will do all in my power to maintain and elevate the standard of my profession, and will hold in confidence all personal matters committed to my keeping, and all family affairs coming to my knowledge in the practice of my calling. With loyalty will I endeavor to aid the physician in his work, and devote myself to the welfare of those committed to my care. Above all, I will do no harm. Our story begins in July in the year of 1950. Genene Jones was born on July 13, 1950 in the state of Texas. She was adopted shortly after her birth by Dick and Gladys Jones. She had several adoptive siblings, both older and younger. Her childhood was marked by loss, instability, and family tragedy. Her father, a nightclub owner and entrepreneur with a flair for risk, had mixed success in his business ventures. One of her younger brothers, named Travis, died in an accident involving a homemade pipe bomb. This happened when Genene was still in high school. Later, both her father and her brother died of cancer. Those two losses heavily weighed on Genene. After graduating high school, she married her high school sweetheart named Jimmy. She was married in the year of 1968. The marriage produced one child and soon ended in divorce in 1974. The two reconciled years later in 1977, and a second child was born. Before Genene became a licensed vocational nurse, she worked as a beautician. In 1977, Genene entered the Licensed Vocational Nursing School training program. This school was located in San Antonio, Texas. She completed the course and graduated as a licensed vocational nurse. Almost immediately, her work in the medical settings invoked some concerns. Though not fully criminal, some scrutiny was there at first. She held early nursing positions in hospitals in San Antonio. At one hospital, she was asked to resign after a conflict with a doctor. She then briefly worked elsewhere before landing a prized position in the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit, also known as PICU. This hospital was located in Bexar County in Texas. This would have been in the year and the month of October 1978. While working in Bexar County at the hospital in the pediatric ICU, a troubling pattern started to emerge. Over the next several years, between the years of 1981 and 82, an unusually high number of infant and toddler patients began to die or suffered serious medical emergencies. Unexpected respiratory failures, seizures, internal bleeding, cardiac arrest. All under the circumstances, this seemed to be irregular. Many of the babies were already ill, but staff began to note that many of the emergent events coincided when Genene Jones was on duty. Nurses, including some of who worked closely with Miss Jones, began whispering amongst themselves. Some reported that things like infants suddenly going into respiratory distress or bleeding, even though prior in the day their vital signs were stable. and that the children sometimes seemed to be worse after a simple procedure when Genene was their nurse. Hospital administrators conducted an internal review. According to reporting, the hospital board produced a secret report implicating her in the deaths of 10 children and several other near-fatal injuries. But the investigations were inconclusive. Some documents were later reported missing or destroyed. Rather than prosecute, in many of the cases, the hospital moved to ask licensed vocational nurses to resign or to work elsewhere. They did this rather than raise public alarm. In 1982, Jones left the San Antonio Hospital and took a job at a pediatric clinic in Kerrville, Texas. This is about 50 to 65 miles northwest of San Antonio. The doctor at that clinic, her name was Kathleen Holland. On September 17, 1982, a 15-month-old child named Chelsea McKellen was brought to the clinic for a routine immunization shot. Jones administered that shot. They were said to be very routine injections. Immediately, Chelsea had trouble breathing, and soon after, she went limp. She was transported by ambulance to the San Antonio emergency room, where she suffered a cardiac and respiratory arrest. Sadly, Chelsea later died. Toxicology reports, including one that was flown overseas to Sweden, later found that Chelsea had been given a powerful paralytic called succinylcholine, which can sometimes stop breathing and paralyze muscles if misused. This death triggered a stronger scrutiny and response. Investigators also discovered puncture marks in a bottle of succinylcholine in the clinic's drug storage, where access to that drug was limited. After Chelsea's death, a grand jury investigation was conducted. Evidence included the punctured drug vial, toxicology reports, witness testimony, and a pattern of other children suffering emergencies under Genene Jones's care. She was then arrested in late 1982. Roughly around November 21st, 1982 to be exact. The trial for the murder of Chelsea McKellen took place in early 1984. The injection given by Jones that preceded Chelsea's collapse, observers testified that immediately after the shot, Chelsea gasped, collapsed, and then stopped breathing. Toxicology reports showed succinylcholine found in samples from Chelsea's body. The defense claimed that the death was from natural causes, possibly complications, but the prosecution countered that this was a paralytic drug and that it was not part of the normal immunization of standard pediatric procedures. Evidence of puncture marks in the bottle of the succinylcholine indicated possible tampering. Witnesses, including Dr. Holland, testified to this fact. Jones decided not to testify. Defense attorneys suggested alternate causes: medical mismanagement, possibly a doctor's error, or perhaps that it was some other type of emergency event. Or maybe Chelsea had some other underlying conditions. This, however, did not explain the succinylcholine that was found in Chelsea's body. On February 15, 1984, Jones was found guilty of the murder of Chelsea McKellen. she was sentenced to 99 years in prison for that murder. In a separate trial the same year, she was convicted of injuring a child by the name of Orlando Santos. He was only 4 weeks old. She injected him with heparin, which is a powerful blood thinner. Somehow he survived, but suffered serious harm. For that, she received a 60-year sentence to be served concurrently with the 99 years. After her conviction in 1984, Jones was in prison. But questions lingered. How many children had died or been injured because of Genene Jones's actions? Prosecutors deduced that they believed the number to be as high as 40 to 60. One complicating factor, because of Texas law during the 1970s and the early 1980s intended to reduce prison overcrowding, there was a provision that with certain prisoners, they were made eligible for mandatory release after serving a third of their sentence, assuming they had good behavior and under other conditions. Under that law, Jones was scheduled to be released in 2018. Her potential release triggered renewed investigations by local prosecutors. In 2017, when it appeared she might be released, Bexar County District Attorney Nico LaHood indicted her on new charges for the death of Richard Nelson, Rosemary Vega, Paul Villarreal, Joshua Sawyer, and Patrick Zavala, all infants or toddlers. They would have all been under Genene Jones's care from 1981 to 1982. Of these indictments, one case, the death of Joshua Sawyer, an 11-month-old, in December of 1981, was resolved in January of 2020. Jones turned in a guilty plea. For Sawyer's murder, among other charges were dropped. As part of the plea deal, she was sentenced to life in prison for that additional conviction. At this point in time, Jones remains incarcerated. The life sentence for Joshua Sawyer adds to her previous terms and ensures she is likely to spend the rest of her life behind bars. Her eligibility for parole was pushed out. Under the new 2020 plea agreement, her earliest possible parole will be in 2037, by which time she will be around 87 years old, assuming she lives that long. There is no known definitive count of all the victims. Estimates vary, commonly between 40 and 60 infants and children who died or were harmed under her care. But many hospital records are missing, or they were just simply destroyed, which has hindered further prosecutions. The case raised major questions about hospital oversight, institutional responsibility, medical record keeping, and how signs of unusual mortality in pediatric wards are addressed. There were criticisms that the hospital ignored warning signs, that many deaths were attributed to natural causes or complications, and that unless a death is explicitly linked to a criminal action, others often move on. Also, it has provoked strong reactions in the public from the families of the victims and led to policy, interest, and change to prevent similar healthcare serial killings, incidents, or angel of death cases. Now, one thing we try to figure out here on this channel is what could have been Genene's possible motives. What was her psychology? Let's think about that for a minute and go over some facts. While many facts of what she was convicted of are clear, several aspects remain under speculation, and some remain unsolved. Like her motive, there is no singular agreed upon motive. Some prosecutors have suggested she sought attention, drama, perhaps praise, that by creating a medical emergency, she could be seen as the hero who then saved the child. Others believe she was driven by a compulsion or deep psychological disturbance. Jones at the time made statements in prison, including a famous one in 1998 to a parole officer: "I really did kill those babies." Because records are missing, and because some investigations were never fully pursued, the exact number of unknown deaths and injuries remain unknown. Estimates say up to 60, though only a small number have been formally charged. There are references in some reporting to Jones being deeply disturbed, to having health and hospital personnel comment like, "The drama of the emergencies, whether she was ever formally diagnosed with a mental illness in court, is less clearly reported." Now, what are the lessons we can learn from learning about Genene Jones? In telling this story, what emerges is both horror and caution. The horror of a nurse, someone entrusted with care of the most vulnerable, allegedly betraying that trust in the most grotesque way. The parents who lost children, sometimes without explanations for years. The grief, the outrage. But we've also learned some lessons here. Medical institutions must monitor not just individual deaths, but patterns. Staff concerns must not be dismissed. Drug controls in clinics must be secure. Toxicology and autopsy protocols must allow outsiders to re-examine causes of death. Oversight needs to remain with licensing boards, hospital boards, and law enforcement. They all have an integral important part to play. For Genene Jones, as the last major update, there is no prospect of release before 2037. And prosecutors continue to assert a responsibility to account for every child taken by her alleged actions. So, ladies and gentlemen, what do you think was really driving Genene Jones to take the lives of those innocent infants and toddlers? Was she playing God? Was she acting on some twisted angel of death? Could it have been Munchausen by proxy syndrome? Or was she just simply a deeply disturbed individual who committed the unthinkable? We want to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment down below. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Last Breath Diaries. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And of course, hit that notification bell so you never miss whenever we drop